Now we'll go to Jabalia, where the main operations have been. Of course, the brutal siege. Um, Thanks to Maxwell for updating our map. We've got Jabalia camp here where people can see, and Beit Lahia is in the northwest. And early in the war, the place that the Israelis came in the early days of the war was down the coast. So the Israelis control the coastline to the west of Beit Lahia. So that has been a key part of their battle strategy. They usually come in from the east over through 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐈. Rifat talked about how 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐈 was um, always a center of resistance because they're the closest to the border to the east. Well, this war, Israel changed it up and had a different strategy. They came down through the Netzarim corridor and pushed on Gaza City from the north. And then they came, rather than coming east and pushing into 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐈, where they expected stiff resistance, they moved over and came down the coastline from Beit Lahia. So the first battles were in Beit Hanun and Beit Lahia, but the second battles were in Tel El Hawa on the coast there, which was surprising to me that was their move. But that is, they came across the corridor and up and attacked Gaza City from the south. And so these battles in Jabalia that we're going to see here, this one major operation takes place in the west of Jabalia because the Israelis control the coastline. So let's take a look at number 10, because that was the one we showed before. Yeah, here. Army Radio put this out kind of without Israeli Army Radio, kind of without any comment. It's almost like they're proud of it. This is Jabalia before and Jabalia after. And I've shown you this of Rafah. We've shown you this of all places that Israel has occupied. It just physical erasure of the environment. It's absolutely disgusting and devastating that this is allowed to happen. And the accountability for these crimes has to be a priority for the international community going forward. We've watched on Israeli social media the glee, the absolute glee the soldiers have in destroying this landscape, brick by brick, house by house. And so I just wanted to show you that this disgusting image. And I don't have any other word for it. And this is the other part that's horrifying. The aid flow, the 500 trucks a day is the siege level from before the war. That was the Gaza siege. If we were doing this show in 2021, we would be talking about the siege on Gaza and how products are not getting in. 500, there hasn't been more than 300 at any point in this war. And if you look down at December, you're seeing zero aid shipments to the north. The north is Western Erez, and Gate 96. And you can see that none of those colors are in December. The north is not getting any aid, and there's days where there's no trucks at all getting into Gaza. They're starving the population. They're destroying the physical infrastructure. And that is the goal of the war, to terrorize the children, to starve them, and to starve their own people. And the military has pointed that out a number of times. But this has been 70 days now, 70 plus days of the siege of Jabalia. And this the numbers from this graph are from UNRWA, from the UN Relief Works Agency, who manages the aid in Gaza. So I just wanted to give you that context. Now we're going to look at number 12 here, and I'm going to let you hear this fighter. There's audio in at the beginning of number 12 here that we're going to listen to.
محمود من زرد السلاسل وكل يا محمود من دم غير قاتل من ضحكة الأطفال من حزن الأرامل يا محمود. مين محمود؟ محمود الخوالي مؤسس الجهاز العسكري.
That's an incredible shot. So we've seen these fighters, we've seen them reading novels in position, waiting for the enemy. And he was singing, "You come, Mahmoud." He's singing about Mahmoud Khwaja, who's an instrumental fighter. I'll tell you more about it after we watch this. So this is an EFP. This is Israel Quds version of the Shawath, the explosively formed penetrator. They're on the street here. This video is incredible. You got to watch it on my Twitter with the sound, because they have made essentially a mini movie with this one. You can see the soldier's head sticking out of this tank here, and he's got his Yasin 105 out the window with an elevated firing position. Um, and the we're going to see here in a second the hit on the tank that has separated the helmet from. We're showing this burning. This is Israel Quds says this is the tank that was hit burning, and they show in this next shot here. You can see the helmet that was on that Israeli tanker is now on the ground after this operation. And then they're showing you here the positions that they're in. And this is interesting. This is a rifle grenade. This is an original weapon that Gaza used to use back in the earliest days of the armed struggle. It's a grenade that you put on the end of your rifle and fire it as a projectile, kind of as an artillery. But as we go back out and watch this one more time, I want to explain Mahmoud Khwaja and what they're
تجيء
singing.
يا محمود من ذرة
He's singing
السلاسل
essentially a folk song.
وخذ يا محمود من دم عين قاتل من ضحكة الأطفال من حزن الأرامل يا محمود مين محمود؟ محمود الخواجة مؤسس الجهاد العسكري.
And the fighter, so his buddy says, "Who's that about?" And he says, "It's about Mahmoud Khwaja, he says he's the founder of the military jihad." And that's exactly what he was. In the early 1980s, Mahmoud Khwaja was a singularly focused on armed struggle and getting the Islamic movement to join the armed struggle that at that time was led by the leftists and the PFLP and the nationalists. And he was inspired by the Iranian Revolution, as many were, to fight and to flip the order, to have liberation come before your Islamic State rather than build the Islamic State for liberation. And he used to get a lot of grief, Mahmoud Khwaja. He would be attacked in the mosques. He was attacked, but ultimately he convinced, his persistence convinced, and the Islamic Jihad fighters and their fighting spirit convinced, formed the nucleus of the armed struggle, which Hamas had to then essentially respond to Islamic Jihad, and also form the Qassam Brigades, what became the Qassam Brigades. So this is really the nucleus of the armed struggle, that this fighter in Jabalia is singing a folk song about, and the folk song is the eulogy from the assassination of Mahmoud Khwaja, and it was written by Ramadan Shalah, who was the late Secretary General of Islamic Jihad. And it's just a beautiful eulogy. He says, "You come, Muhammad, from the chains." Mahmoud, sorry. "You come, Mahmoud, from the chains. Mahmoud rises from our fighting blood, from the laughter of our children and the grief of our widows." Um, it's just another part of the eulogy by Ramadan Shalah says, because he was assumed to be assassinated by the Israelis. It says, "You psychotic killer, just wait. My blood spilled will not write your victory. It engraves in stone my birth and your death. My spilled blood will not write your victory, Israel. It engraves in stone my birth, the birth of the armed struggle and the revolution, and it engraves your death." And what we're seeing here is fighters 2 generations later referring back to the foundations of the armed struggle in this, and it's a remarkable moment. Part of the eulogy says, "Mahmoud, you are the gun, you are the pen, you are the map, you are the flag, you are Palestine, and you flow, Mahmoud, from the tears of the refugee camp. You appear, Mahmoud, from our fighting spirit. You appear, Mahmoud, from the thirst and hunger of our prisoners, Mahmoud. You come. You've come from the chains of the prisons into the laughter of our children and the sorrow of our widows. You will always be there, Mahmoud." So that's from the early 1990s, and we have fighters in 2024 sitting in their battle position, waiting to carry out this operation, which is a remarkable operation to be carried out 70 days into into the siege on Jabalia, and to just link it back to that struggle and to understand the history of that struggle and what Mahmud Khawaja fought through to ultimately unify the Islamic movements. And he commanded some of the early operations with Yahya Ayash, who was the first bomb maker for Qassam. And they worked together, Islamic Jihad and Qassam worked together on operations that predate really the political organization of Hamas. That comes after. And that's an important thing to always note, because when we're talking about Hamas, the Hamas movement is a political movement in Gaza. Some people support Hamas, some people don't, like any government in any country. But the resistance movement, the Qassam brigades, are uniformly supported throughout Gaza. The fighters are seen as the heroes of their society. They're not seen as an arm of Hamas. They're seen as the Qassam brigades who fight for Palestine. If the government of Hamas were to be elected out of government, that would not change how people feel about the Qassam brigades and these fighters. And that story is just a remarkable story. And this next one is also a remarkable one, number 13. What we're going to see here is a Qassam operation in the western edge, and it says Monday, December 9th, 67 days into the brutal siege, Qassam carried out a qualitative operation, a tight ambush against enemy personnel and armored vehicles west of the Jabaliya camp. They call this the Falluja ambush. It's in the Falluja neighborhood of west of Jabalia. And we see here the fighter looking on a closed circuit television again. On the top of the table is the map, and he's planning out the operation. But on the whiteboard, it says 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Battalion. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 was the first commander of Qassam. He was an operative. He was their spokesperson. He was their weapons maker. And they have named a special forces unit after him. On the board, it says 𝐓𝐡𝐞, you're the father of zero distance. And it also says, we do not give up. We win or we die. And 𝐓𝐡𝐞's zero distance is he was famous for operations primarily targeted against Israeli police and against collaborators. And the zero distance name comes from well-planned operations 𝐓𝐡𝐞 would carry out, where he would literally climb on the roof, on the hood of a car, and shoot a collaborator and take their guns. And the killing of collaborators was the key part of the early days of Hamas, of Qassam and Sarai al-Quds, because the collaborators were killing them, but also the collaborators had guns. And so you killed the collaborator and took their guns, and now the resistance movement had weapons that came from the Israelis. And here these are fighters praying. They're praying for the martyrs in the camp. They're praying for the wounded civilians in the camp and in Gaza in general. The fighters are always deeply connected to the people that they're defending, and that's part of their popularity. What we're looking at here is an operation that's going to be against an Israeli engineering unit that is leaving Gaza. They're going out on furlough. They have been in Gaza for 3 months. There you see them with their bags packed, ready to go home. On social media, they posted about how they were going home. And here they are being watched, getting in the back of a troop transporter truck. Qassam finds them with field reconnaissance. They point out, the commander says, because of field reconnaissance, they watched this and they got them. They got them in the back of that truck. I've edited these videos again so that they can stay online. You can watch the full video on my Twitter feed. But they got these guys. They fired on them. They fired a thermobaric Yasin strike against them. And this is the window that they're in, soldiers in a window still, 14 months on. And this was a very successful operation. They killed at least 3 of these special forces soldiers, and this is showing you the before and after. They're getting on to the truck. And from Army Radio, this is from Army Radio. According to the initial IDF probe, the incident took place this morning at an IDF encampment in Jabalia as the troops were getting ready to head out of the strip for a furlough, for a break. The troops were boarding a lightly armored truck using transport troop. They were boarding a lightly armored troop transporter. Sorry. When Hamas operatives launched anti-tank projectiles and opened fire on them, 3 soldiers were killed, 12 others were wounded seriously during the fighting. Um, and 6 others were lightly wounded, including reservists from the Artillery Corps Sky Riders Union unit, which are in serious condition. The operation took the number of IDF soldiers admitted killed to over 40 in the Jabalia operation. So, as you can see here, this is the fighters, the commander. They have the clothesline. They're able to CCTV watch the surveillance after 70 days of devastation in Jabalia. They're planning out the operation with this special forces unit. The 𝐓𝐴𝐽 battalion is a 𝐶𝐤𝐚 special forces unit. We've heard from them a few times during the war, but you can see they're all in tactical gear, ready to carry out this operation. And the story of 𝐓𝐴𝐽 is a really important one in the history of the resistance as well. He was born in Jabaliya camp, so this is fighters in Jabalia saluting fighters from Jabalia, something we've seen all along. And Aqil was driven out of Majd al-Ashkelon, like most Gazawis, driven out of the Gaza envelope, what is now the Gaza envelope, like many other leading figures like Abu Ubaidah was from Majdal as well. He was killed when he was 22 years old, but before dying at 22 years old, he became the first Qassam operative, a commander who carried out the nucleus of building the Qassam brigades from their youth movement. He was their spokesperson. He was the first person to be a spokesperson, and he wore his kafia in a similar way and Abu Ubaidah wears it a bit tighter, but Abu Ubaidah has on a number of occasions worn it exactly the same way as 𝐴𝐽 did, as a salute to him. And you can see graffiti and paintings all over Gaza of 𝐴𝐽. Mahmoud al-Zahar, who's the senior leader, the senior most leader, political leader of Hamas, wrote a book about 𝐴𝐽. Aqil carried out something like 30 operations, killed 11 soldiers. Many times the Israelis lied about how many soldiers were killed. And so he was part of the Hezbollah generation of recording operations as proof of what happened. And like I said, they call him the father of zero distance because a number of his ambushes were well prepared ambushes where he would literally jump on the trunk of a car, on the hood of a car, and carry out the execution of the collaborators. He targeted Shabak, the Israeli internal security. He targeted their soldiers. He targeted their prison guards. So just really well placed operations against the most repressive figures in the Gaza Strip, and that's how he got. So famous, was for those operations. And interestingly, he was sheltered in Shujaiya, just down the road from where Rafat lived, with the Farhat family, and he would carry out his actions. Half the day he would carry out these operations, and the other half of the day he would dig a tunnel underneath the house. And he was so in many ways was the forebearer of the concept of the tunnels for the resistance fighters under, in this case, under Miriam Farhat's house. And ultimately, he was killed in 1993 after 2 years on the run. He was killed in a shootout in Shujaiya at that time. When he was caught in his tunnel by a collaborator turned him in. And that's why the Qassam Brigade's first units were anti-collaborator units, because the collaborators were playing a critical role in destroying the armed struggle. Israelis used those collaborators to devastating effect in those early years. And the trajectory of that is to today, where the collaborators are not a factor in Gaza anymore. We have one more. Number 14 is just from the rest of that video, which is showing the destroyed D9 bulldozers that I told you about earlier. There you can see what I described a couple weeks ago, what the cockpit looks like. The seats of the commander and the driver are at different levels, which makes it those hits on the cockpit that much more devastating. So you can see here, these are disabled vehicles, disabled tanks and D9 armored bulldozers. And at the end of the video, this is attached to the same video, the 𝐴𝐽 operation, and it says, "We don't surrender or give up. we win or we die, and that's martyrdom or victory is the only these fighters are not going to give up, and that's where it says that. So that is the resistance report from Rafah and Jabalia, day 439, still going, no signs of let up.